Well, welcome to the Tech and Space Leader Show, where we learn lessons from leaders of the next frontier. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Bob Landsfield. He is the founder and CEO of Skymira. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Well, thanks, Lisa. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here today. Maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourself and Skymira.
Okay. Well, we started the company back in 1998. So that predates cellular internet and wireless internet in general. And one of the things we've always written software applications for satellite, various networks and so forth. So the very first application that we did that launched the customer was a POP3 SMTP email service over Outlook Express. So those of us with enough gray hair remember that application there. And so we've always done that. We've always paid a good amount of attention to requests from various customers and added services, form services, GPS tracking, things of that nature over the years. And so today, our primary applications are radio over IP. So federal law enforcement, first responders are a large part of our customer base. And we still do a lot of GPS tracking, not only in the traditional sense, but we track, P25 portable radios as an example for wildland fire and things of that nature. So been at it a long time. It's a evolving industry. It's very exciting, especially these days. And so we'll continue to write those applications going forward.
Oh my gosh, you've seen a lot of changes over the years. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So, as you're looking forward, what do you see as some of the primary growth factors for satellite internet?
Right. Well, probably, obviously, the biggest change in the industry, the price points. Starlink is just driving the price points down, both in terms of hardware and services, to a level that many customers traditionally wouldn't be a customer for satellite just because the hardware is expensive, the service was expensive, and that type of thing. So I would say the largest change is really because those prices are coming down so dramatically. That's just going to broaden the scope of the users that are able to take advantage of this new connectivity. A good example of that, so Nova Space, a research firm, released a report probably 3-4 months ago, something along that line. And it was interesting that they are predicting in the next 10 years that the satellite industry will exceed $1 trillion as the industry, the size of the industry there.
Wow.
And what's really exciting about that is that $400 billion plus growth is going to be generated from new users, but more importantly, it's the applications that are taking advantage of these networks that is really going to drive that growth. Of the 400 billion, they're predicting 300 plus billion of that will be applications that are coming to market and taking advantage of these new satellite networks.
Wow, that is amazing. So it's not only the affordability, but also just the, I guess, ease of use that is making a big difference, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can use it for more things. So, as I mentioned, we started in 98. So we witnessed on the cellular side, cellular internet becoming a thing, right? So, the first generation and the second generation of cellular was basically voice, right? Going to digital. So as 3G, when that came out, that became a real internet, but that all predates iPhones and Androids and things like that. So, I'm a technical geek, so I was an early adopter of, I guess I would hesitate to call it a smartphone back then, but it was a phone with a screen. And ultimately, I mean, it barely made phone calls very nicely, but there was really no applications for it to use. There was nothing for it to use. So this new technology, these new networks basically enabled, I guess I'll call it an application ecosystem. So when the iPhones came out and Android, they basically made an ecosystem so that application developers could provide this various functionality that made the iPhone and the Android what it is today. Very functional. We use it for a million different things, but at the end of the day, it's that cellular internet that provided that. So I really think that the satellite industry is going through a similar genesis right now. So the costs are coming down. We're starting to see some of that ecosystem. The NTN providers, for example, Viasat's coming out with an NTN chip, and the IoT community is very excited about that. And you'll see a lot of new applications generated from that. And I think, from the internet side of things, protocols and things of that nature, I think, or at least hope that ecosystem will continue to grow and flourish on the satellite side as well.
Right. So from a Skymira perspective, what are you doing as a company to make satellite connectivity more affordable and accessible?
Right. So our primary lines of business I mentioned is, radio over IP is by far the fastest growing segment of that. And what we mean by radio over IP is basically, everybody knows what a portable radio or a quote unquote walkie-talkie looks like, right? So the three problems that we solve for that community is gaps in coverage is by far the largest problem that we solve there. So those radios will either use an RF terrestrial network, radio towers, you see them, all over where the police band radios use, that type of thing. But also some of them are starting to use LTE towers as well. So the terrestrial network is only going to cover so much area. So we're utilizing these new satellite solutions at a price point that is making that connectivity to fill in those gaps much more affordable. So that combined with the fact that, we've got a long history in developing applications for satellite networks, that our applications are very, very efficient. It only needs 10 kilobits of bandwidth, which in today's world is, it's basically a thread. It's very, very minimal.
Yeah.
When we developed some of this technology, for example, to work over BGAN and some of those more expensive networks, it was still very affordable to be able to utilize that just because we were using it so efficiently. So basically, I guess the two things that we're bringing to the market is very good software that, takes advantage of these networks at a very cost-effective means. And then all the network providers, Starlink and Project Kuiper from Amazon's going to be launching here soon. Telesat in Canada has got Lightspeed. So lots of LEO networks coming up. We're presuming that everybody else will get on the bandwagon and continue to reduce the price on the hardware and the services. So, we're taking advantage and bringing these applications to market to take advantage of all these new networks that are coming online.
That is fantastic. What type of application? So I guess, can you give us a little bit more detail on the applications and what they enable?
Sure. So again, in the radio over IP world, you might have, let's say a law enforcement officer, they're out west in New Mexico or, Arizona, something along that line. So they've got just huge gaps in coverage. They're patrolling the areas where the other 98% of the population, isn't living, right? So there's plenty of connectivity. I guess the big statistic is, 98% of the population in the United States, for example, has connectivity because they're all in cities and metropolitan areas and things of that nature. Everywhere else, that's a problem. So wildland fire and first responders, search and rescue, things of that nature. So in the technology that we're using, we could put a terminal on a vehicle, for example, and we're going to have our device inside the vehicle. And that is what we call a radio over IP gateway, which that job is basically to take audio from my portable radio. I can get out of the vehicle, walk 2 miles away or something, whatever the range of that portable radio is. And it'll transmit back to the vehicle, and then it'll go up, and the radio over IP gateway's job is to take that audio, my voice, and turn that into satellite IP packets, send it over the network, and then it's going to land at a dispatcher or another vehicle 10 miles away or something of that nature. So that's in a nutshell, without getting too technical, what radio over IP does. It's a close cousin If you have, telephone lines in your office, for example, that's voice over IP. It's the same idea. You're using a telephone to dial a number, picking up the receiver, but your audio is being turned into, your voice is being turned into IP packets that go over a network. So we do exactly the same thing, except our users have a device with a push to talk button on it, and that information will go over the network as well.
Wow, amazing. What are, I guess, how is what Skymira is doing different from what other solution providers might be providing?
So I guess in the traditional satellite provider industry that we're all used to, you have a satellite, network that's deployed. There's a company flying those satellites. Then you have, a channel distribution partners and going down to service providers to provide that service through there. So at the service provider level, that's generally the company that is buying bulk services from the network provider and then making those services available to end users and selling into that market. So that's where Skymira fits. And so there's probably, the big difference is the traditional service providers, many of them, especially historically, they buy the terminals, they put the SIM card in, they provide the service, and they resell that. So they don't do a whole bunch of, system integration, that type of thing. Then there are system integrators. So there's service providers out there that do a certain amount of system integration. And what that means is they're taking other devices that are on the market, they're commercially available, and they're putting them in the kits and they're plugging them in, and they're making some value add there by combining multiple devices and integrating that for then further sale. And Skymira does that to a certain extent as well, but we take it a step further because we've been writing software for these networks from day one, that we have a lot of intellectual property, a lot of these applications and a lot of the devices that, we're an OEM now. We provide a device called the IP relay, which is P25 for law enforcement, transparent pipe to send P25 information over a network in addition to the audio. So we're actually developing intellectual property and bringing that to the market utilizing these networks as well. So we take it a step further, I guess.
Very exciting. Why is it so important to keep these folks connected when they go outside of like a cell range?
Safety is probably, at least in our customer base, probably safety is the number one thing. So you're working, you're on a job, whether it's a utility or oil and gas or law enforcement or search and rescue, you're out in the middle of nowhere, sometimes by yourself. And so safety, just, common sense means if I get into trouble, I injure myself or something like that, I want to be able to call somebody for help. So very basic information.
Sure.
The flip side of that, particularly, is efficiency in your operation, right? So I think I mentioned that a lot of rural electric co-ops now are starting to come into the marketplace because the cost of the hardware and the services is affordable for those local community-driven types of organizations. So before this technology came out and they were starting to use it, they would have technicians, drive 2 hours sometimes out to a job or something like that. Then they'd have to come back and literally, we've had conversations with these folks where the technician is driving 45 minutes looking for a cell signal, and then he can call the dispatcher, whoever that may be. So, the efficiency end of it is a pretty easy, low-hanging fruit as well. So those are the two things I think that primarily are the big drivers there. As you get into some more specialized applications, everybody, especially in IoT, you're doing pipeline, monitoring and all of that type of thing. So these networks and this non-terrestrial network idea is going to really create some applications that, that whatever that application happens to be doing, it makes sense for that particular customer, and they're going to derive a benefit from that.
Sure. What do you see as some of the biggest growth areas over the next decade or so?
Well, going back to that report, the big growth area is because the price point, again, is coming down to such a level, you're going to see just, the population, the available users for these networks now is just going to explode, just because, it's not only the directed device, you're starting to see that come in there where you can do emergency calls and some text messaging and things of that nature. But again, you can start rolling that out into other types of industries that wouldn't historically, want to use that type of thing for one reason or another, usually cost. I had to do some testing recently. I was in Montana and I had to drive from Missoula up to a small town by the Canadian border. So I was driving through some pretty rural, good mountain passes. And I had a terminal on my roof. So I was just using, a Wi-Fi phone call application. And I was able to have a 2-hour call when I'm on this drive, didn't drop the connection once. Now, if I hadn't had that and I was relying on LTE, I would have been, if I was able to have a conversation more than 30 minutes during that entire trip, that would have been something. So I also think on the consumer side, whether it's going to be direct to device or we're going to start to see some of these terminals embedded into vehicles and things of that nature. When I finished that trip, I was like, I'd pay some extra money to have this on my vehicle, just so if I was living out in those areas and that was a common problem, to be able to utilize that. So, the short answer is it's just going to be appealing and more widely available and used by just, a much greater percentage of the population.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I want to end with one last question, and that is, if you were to make a prediction about the future of connectivity, what would it be?
I guess, just hitting back on the cellular side, I really think that satellite, in terms of everybody's life, that, whether you're a consumer or you're in the business, I just would predict that satellite will be on par with cellular as far as it touching your life, utilizing it, being able to take advantage of some of the features on it. So, I think over the next decade or two, as the technology evolves, and we can start using it more with our phones and things of that nature, that, it's going to be just another cellular or cell type network that'll be use the same at the same level for sure.
Absolutely. I hope so. I hope so. I am looking forward to that prediction coming true.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to learn more about Skymira, what should they do?
Best bet is just to visit our website, Skymira.com. We've got a lot of educational material on there. So anybody that has a device with a push-to-talk radio, button on it, and you want to be able to communicate, in wider areas, we've got a lot of educational information there from that area. GPS tracking as well. In our GPS tracking, we track a lot of fire trucks and things of that nature, but we never really got a lot into the trucking industry or typical, what you would think of on that. But we track a lot of different types of devices, P25 radios and all the other type of things as well. So if you need situational awareness or you need to be able to communicate, then just visit us on our website.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for making time to be here today. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it too. It was very enjoyable. Thank you.
Excellent. I do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, you can visit guideforce.com. And we will see you next time on the Tech and Space Leaders Show.